mean, we lost.
Joe,
Connor.
yeah.
Welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee's Thursday. It is Thursday, February 5th. We are struggling to have a quorum. And because we have some folks who are working in the subcommittee and then some other folks are doing something somewhere. But we are going to get started. We're not taking any action. We're just hearing some testimony. We're working on the capital bill, section 9. And we're working on the Waterbury Dam. It's 175 for a spreadsheet. There is a governor's recommend of 150,000 general fund dollars to be used for the Waterbury ongoing project. This Waterbury Dam project has been going on for 8 years, 10.
It started in 2024.
I know, but when we really started working in here was probably a good pre-COVID. Started working on.
Start
So
with the answer to that question when it's my, I'll start with the answer to that question when it's my time.
it's been a while we've worked on this. So we have A&R folks here to give us an update on where we are with the Waterbury Dam project and with the 150,000 in previous appropriations. We got a previous one. So we have the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. So welcome. If you could identify yourself, Neil, that would be great.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Emmons. So my name is Neil Kamen. I am the Deputy Commissioner, Department of Environmental Conservation. With me to my left here is our Chief Dam Safety Engineer, Ben Green, whom you've heard from before. Let's just start my remarks by saying you all sleep better at night because this gentleman does what he does.
You do it Montpelier, if I tell you that.
No, I'm very, very serious about that.
Sleep at night.
He does, that's actually true. He does not. The answer to your question is about 2016, when we started to attach initial feasibility money to this project to look into what we needed to do for the structure that you see behind you.
And yours.
Yeah, exactly. And I've actually been part of that. I've been a little bit the engine that could, along with Mr. Eric Blatt, who's now retired, if you all remember him. So what we'd like to do today is just take a little bit of sort of open time to reorient you to the Waterbury Dam project. And in addition to just walking through some basics around it, I actually asked Ben if he would kind of provide some real schematics so you can actually see, what is being planned for the dam and the magnitude of the project. Because, I'm sensitive that when you all see a capital project that comes along and we're building a building or, we're improving dams. This project really has advanced and we have initial design. It's in design. Ben will tell you the whole deal, but we want to show it to you. So if it's too much, just say next slide, please. But Ben has provided some very, very informative slides in this presentation. So,
I think it's also important for the committee to realize we're also working with the Army Corps of Engineers.
correct.
On this. It's not
Absolutely.
just us, and the bulk of the money is coming from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Correct. Yeah. So to my sort of second to last point on this slide, this is a partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and frankly, with our congressional delegation. So I don't think a 3-month period goes by that I don't have some kind of conversation with the Army Corps. And I don't think 3 days goes by that Ben doesn't on the operational side of things. So you've heard a little bit about the dam safety program already. I won't get into much of the details, except to just remind you all that Waterbury is the largest dam that we own and operate, but it's one of 3 incredibly important flood control facilities in the Winooski River Valley, the other 2 being Wrightsville, upstream of us on the North Branch, and then East Barry up along a little bit further upstream in Barry. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get out of the hot seat and let Ben take you through the overall project. And then at the back end, I'm going to sit back down and I'm going to walk you through the funding stack, including what we've spent previously, where those dollars came from, and where capital and cash fund bonded dollars are right now for this project. I know that's something that y'all would want to know. So with that, I'm just going to let Ben take it away.
Welcome, Ben. You're back in the hot seat.
For the record, my name is Ben Green. I'm the section chief of the dam safety program. And my team is the one that does the primary ownership responsibilities and operation work at Waterbury Dam. Hoping just to give a brief overview of the dam for those that are not familiar. Here's some aerial image of the dam and of the gate system in particular, and the spillway system that's really the subject of the project. Waterbury Dam has a drainage area of 109 square miles. It's located in Waterbury, but the drainage area extends all the way to the peak of Mount Mansfield to the north, and it's bounded by the Green Mountain Range and Worcester Range to the west and east. The dam's 187 feet tall, making it the third tallest dam in the state. In terms of storage capacity, it's the fourth largest. So this is one of the biggest dams in the state, and it's Neil indicated, by far the largest dam that we own and operate. The dam is rated as a high hazard potential dam. Reminder, high hazard potential dam means that in the event of a dam failure, loss of life would be probable. The population at risk located downstream of this dam, per somewhat recent estimates from the Army Corps of Engineers, a reminder, population at risk is basically the number of people that are located within the estimated flood inundation zone of a dam failure. Is roughly 5,000 people. And the estimated life loss, should we have a failure under a flood event, is roughly between 800 and 900. In the event we had such a failure, we'd be looking at roughly 1,400 structures inundated and damages in the $300 to $800 million range. So, especially downstream of this dam, the dam extends down to the Winooski River through 16 communities all the way to Lake Champlain is the flood zone of this dam. The dam provides flood protection and roughly estimated at $4 million in flood damage prevented annually. The dam has other additional uses. The second reason the dam exists is for hydropower. The dam supports a 5 megawatt hydropower plant that's owned and operated by Green Mountain Power, who have been essentially project partners at this dam since day one, where they actually gave a bunch of the land that made original construction of this dam possible. And then really the third main use of the reservoir is recreation. This reservoir supports 2 state parks, the Little River State Park and the Waterbury Center State Park, as well as several boat ramps and access areas. And is a very popular recreational asset.
When was the dam built?
The dam was completed in 1938. The 3 flood control dams that are in existence right now came into initial concept design following the 1927 flood, which is the most severe flood on record in central Vermont. 55 people were killed in that flood. Actually, more dams than just these 3 were originally conceptually designed, but those were the 3 that moved forward in construction. And that work was done by the Army Corps of Engineers. So they've also been a project partner throughout the entirety of the existence of this dam.
Excellent. I gotta back you up. What is EI 592-617?
Elevation.
Yeah, so that image is of the floodgates. There's 3 of them. There's 2 that are 20 feet wide. They're on the right side of the image that were the original ones. And then in the 1950s, the third one, which is the left side, was added. The base elevation of those gates is elevation 592. Once we get above that elevation, essentially we're in flood storage mode. And from elevation 592 to elevation 633, that's what we call the flood control band for the dam. That's essentially actually from 592 to 617.5 is the flood control band. The way the dam essentially works in a flood control mode is when gauges along the main stem of the Winooski in Waterbury hit a certain level, that is our instruction per Army Corps procedure and regulation manual to come and close the gates. We essentially shut off the majority of the flow and start in the Little River and start storing it in the dam until reservoir levels in the Winooski River recede back below flood stage. And then we have a procedure for which we slowly discharge that water that we stored in the dam. So it's an active flood control dam. We have some others, Wrightsville and Eastbury, they're considered passive because we don't go out and operate gates. They're sort of designed to self-regulate in a similar manner.
The question, the part of the issue too, if you have a heavy rain like Irene, you don't want the water, you've held all the water back.
Yes.
It could even go above what you're seeing where the word wire rope is. If the water gets so high, it could go above that.
It could go above that. That would be a very severe flood, but yes, they could go above that. And if it were to go above to that level, the original design procedure for these gates is they're not designed to be overtopped. So if we were to have such a severe flood where water came over the top, there's a procedure for us to slowly open the gates and track reservoir rise, so water is never coming over the top of them. And I have a next slide that talks a little bit about this, but to jump ahead a little bit, in 2000, in the early 2000s, there were some issues with the gates jamming and operability issues. And at that time, the Army Corps did a structural assessment of the gates and found they were structurally deficient and placed a load restriction on the gates, which we've been operating under for more than 20 years. That basically while the gate should be designed to have a water level at the top of it, these gates are only designed to have water levels up 70%, or can only safely can't hold back water at 70% of that height. So God forbid if we had a flood of that level, we wouldn't wait till water started to pour over the top to start opening them. We'd have to start opening them when they got to that
That's 7.
lower 70% level. Correct. So and that has to do with the design of the way that the gate's designed. It's actually an issue that's not just, it's this style of gate that has that challenge. And as they've learned over years of these being in service.
They've been updated at all since 38? This is where these are the original.
So the two gates on the right side of this image, the 20-foot wide ones, essentially have received very little or really no updates.
The big one or the
big one, it was put in the 50s.
little ones?
The two little ones are two 20-footers. The main improvement that's been made to these is in the early 2000s when there was gate binding issues. These gates were actually trimmed and new side seals were put on and new side works were put on the gates. But functionally, those gates are as they were installed in the 1930s. In 2024, we actually do some reinforcement on the strut arms, the reinforcement on the back for the center gate because there was a weak point. So we're having band-aided together a little bit in that regard.
I could add, it's very cool Band-Aid.
Big Band-Aid.
Large plates of steel.
Large plates of steel.
Do they get tested like weekly or weekly or monthly or yearly or?
We test operate them. Typically, we make a concerted effort to test operate them at a minimum quarterly. They get test operated for a variety of other reasons more frequently, and they also obviously get operated during floods. So we operate them multiple times per year, both in floods and for testing purposes and other reasons.
Thank you.
So the Waterbury Spillway project, as I mentioned earlier, the project itself has really been around since the early 2000s when that gate jamming occurred, and the study was done that ultimately led to the load restrictions that I've already mentioned. This has been a really kind of a priority project for this program for a long time. The project scope that's been around for roughly 10 years, moving forward with the Army Corps of Engineers, moving through initial risk assessment and then to dam safety modification study, and now we're into design phase. We follow hopefully by project implementation and construction. But the project scope includes full replacement of gates 1 and 2, which again are those two smaller gates, and then restoration of gate 3. As a reminder, gate 3 was installed in the 1950s, so it has better quality steel and had more sophisticated engineering analysis done on it when it was designed, so it doesn't have some of the issues that the other two gates has. We have some erosion just downstream of the gates in the bedrock channel. It's going to be stabilized. The spillway bridge that extends over the top of the spillway and supports the lifting equipment is in very bad condition. It's going to be fully replaced. And with that means all new lifting equipment for the gates themselves. And there's going to be basically spillway wide concrete repairs going on. Unfortunately, the concrete in the dam since original construction has a deficiency in it that causes expansion, which has led to cracking and accelerated deterioration. It's called alkali-silica reaction. It's basically a chemical reaction between the sand in the concrete and the coarse aggregate and the cement paste. Something that in modern construction is tested for, not really an issue, but in the 1930s they didn't fully understand. And unfortunately, this spillway has that issue. In terms of where the project is, we originally did a risk assessment with the Army Corps of Engineers. That was the first portion of work that looked at the whole dam holistically and said, is the spillway really the biggest risk factor at the dam? And we looked at the entirety of the dam, other risk factors, and the risk assessment did point back to the spillway being the biggest risk factor. And then the dam safety modification study got underway and is basically under final review right now. But that was the study that basically went and said, what do we specifically want to do to fix the dam? And that includes, as I mentioned, the scope above. And now we're into the design phase, which is planned to go through 2028, which will hopefully followed by construction. In terms of the project schedule, compared to where we were last year when we presented on this project, it has bumped a year. Originally, construction start was hopeful for maybe as soon as 2027 pending funding, but now it's looking more realistic that it's going to be 2028. The Corps of Engineers has been a great partner on this project and advanced this project a lot. They had some staffing challenges and some other issues that slowed the project a little bit. And we also had the drought this past fall that delayed a project that we were doing that delayed the Corps and doing some of this, their work as well. So that's the reason why the schedule has essentially slid 1 year from what we presented the year before.
Why does it take three? Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go.
Why does it take 3 years for design? 25 to 28, is lack of funding or personnel or?
I think that's part of it. It's a $76 million project to design, so there's a lot of work to do. There's a significant field exploration program that I'll talk about in a future slide that's planned for this spring, and that holds up some of the design work. And once we have that, then they'll be able to really start to advance design, and they'll have updated cost estimates. Hopefully, I was told by the Corps in about a year to a year and a half from now. So it's a significant amount of engineering going into this project. And so it takes time. It's also not the only project that this Corps of Engineers is working on. So
you're pretty secure that the federal funding will come through in a timely manner?
I'll speak to that when we get together. I'll kind of walk through where we are exactly now, what our pluses are and what our risk factors are. I've got a slide on that for you too, actually.
And I offer that this link that's here on this page is a link that we update every few months on the status of the project. It kind of has the full rundown from start to where we are now, and it's updated fairly regularly if you're interested. So now moving on to it's kind of some of the conceptual and roughly 30 to 60% design work that's been done. Believe it or not, a major element of this project is even just getting access over to the spillway. The spillway is located on the far east side of the dam, away from the access roads, and it's fairly difficult to access. So one of the first things that's going to be done in the project construction is a 30 to 50 foot reservoir drawdown or reduction in reservoir level. And the reason why we need to do that is essentially we need to be able to provide the same level of flood protection that we can with our gates operable during the project. Not only will we have our spillway torn apart and be in a somewhat fragile state at the spillway, but we also can't be putting more water downstream and causing flooding issues during the project. So it's going to be a reservoir drawdown, unfortunately, for probably 2 years of construction. And then the first thing that's going to happen is construction of access roads, just to get construction equipment, cranes, et cetera, to the spillway. This plan shows the planned construction of a construction access road going from roughly the midpoint of the dam along the upstream slope, and then access areas and crane pads being installed. There's roughly 20,000 cubic yards of material will need to be delivered to the site in order to construct those work roads alone. And just for context, that's roughly 2,000 truck deliveries of material. And that's just to get access before we even start physically working on the spillway itself.
So it's a 2-year construction cycle that you're going to have to draw down the reservoir.
Correct.
Let's hope we don't have a major rain event like an Irene, because what happens then?
Well, and that's the reason for the large drawdown, is to be able to store that water, basically give commensurate level flood protection during this project as we would have with operable gates by having a much lower flood pool, starting pool. So that's the reason. It's not popular recreationally. It's not necessarily popular environmentally, but it's necessary for to maintain the flood protection
The
during the
reservoir
work.
is used for recreational purposes. Sean,
Then is there a plan to kind of leave all that stuff there so that we can use it again 20 years from now, so we don't have to rebuild it when we have to switch these all out again?
That's a great question. That's sort of under debate right now. From my program's perspective, there's a large advantage to leaving it there, not only for future projects, but just even for access for maintenance and things like that.
Yep.
It's greatly enhanced by leaving it in place. I think that's a kind of a conversation that's happening on several different levels. I know State Historic Preservation is very against leaving it there, and it's even against that alignment due to impacting the historic structure of the dam. So it's unclear where this final decision is going to land. So to us, it makes sense to leave it in place. It saves the cost of taking it out for one, and it provides us future access that could be valuable for other reasons for maintaining the dam. So
I am in full concurrence with your part of the plan.
thank you.
is there any environmental impact of keeping that built in for access? Is there any environmental impact on that?
That's a good question. That's still being evaluated. I would struggle to see one, but I can't fully speak to
So
that.
it would be historic preservation and possibly environmental impact.
Yes, historic preservation, the upstream face of the dam is surfaced with hand-placed stone, almost like a cobblestone road. They're very unique, very unique. And so by installing this, we're essentially removing that and covering it with this construction road. So that's the concern, is that loss of that riprap, the hand-placed riprap. In the early 2000s, they did that. Few watering wells on this side, and they had to disrupt this large area. And so that was sort of there's some talk back to that time frame when the decision was permitted to allow that disruption, and it wasn't made to be put back to original. And now this project adds on to that. So it's an ongoing conversation. I don't know where it's going to land. It's a
So
discussion.
could you work with historic preservation? We've been in this situation a little bit with one of our state-owned properties, the Windsor Correctional Facility, that there are buildings there that are of historic value. And there was quite a time frame that we could not demolish those buildings. So they really need to be demolished to make the property more usable. And we worked through with historic preservation as a way to document those buildings.
Mhm.
Would there be, if you discuss that with historic preservation in terms of a way to document what they really want to preserve there?
Yeah, that's an ongoing discussion. And it's largely being held with the Corps. I have some involvement. I know one of the
Is it more-
Preferences
Is it
of the-
Vermont historic or is it
Yes.
national?
Vermont store. One of the preferences, one of the push pulls is another alternative that they prefer. There's the port doesn't go out far enough. There's a boat ramp at the west end of the dam. Their preference is, once the reservoir is drawn down, to build a temporary construction road under what would be under the normal water level. The challenge with that is it's like 3 times the length. So
Might get eroded.
yeah. Add duration and a lot more work to the project to do it that way. So those are discussions that are being had right now. I don't know if they're gonna.
So you have to get agreement from the Army Corps as well, no matter what we may decide on the state level. The Army Corps,
Correct.
it's their dam. Or more so their dam,
It's our dam.
our dam.
Yeah, fortunately, our dam.
We're in partnership.
We're in partnership, but we are a minority, I guess, yeah, arguably a minority owner with the cost share, but we are actually the owner. And we do get quite a bit of input and say. This next slide is just is here to show some of the modifications being made to the spillway. As part of, as I mentioned, the spillway bridge being replaced with a vehicle width bridge to provide access out to the lifting equipment. It required widening out the spillway piers. So that's what's shown here in the light blue. It is the additional concrete that will be constructed to expand the width of the piers to support a much wider bridge that will give us, for the first time, vehicle access out to the lifting equipment, which is very important. It's actually very difficult to work on our lifting equipment because it's only foot access to it now. We actually experienced that, and I'll talk about that in a slide upcoming. So those are examples of some of the construction that's going to be happening is expanding the piers. The image on the left here is it addresses that bedrock erosion issues we have at the outlet of the channel, outlet of the spillway, where continued flow has essentially eaten away the bedrock and caused potential stability issues with the spillway itself. There's going to be basically a concrete stabilizing unit installed along the downstream side of the spillways to arrest that issue. This next slide shows some of the proposed designs of the new gates. It might be difficult to kind of discern from what the original gates look like to this, but gates 1 and 2 are being fully replaced. And so they're basically new units that will be probably constructed in 2 segments offsite, brought on site, bolted and welded together, and then installed via crane. Gate 3, that's the larger 50-foot gate, is in much better condition. So that one's going to be structurally reinforced, and you can see in the image on this image here, the additional steel that will be added to the gate to improve it. It's about 7,000 additional pounds of steel will be added to reinforce gate 3.
And Ben, that then allows it to have the water going up higher, not the 70%, but 100%.
Yep, no, when the project's completed, the load restriction will no longer be in effect.
That's
Be able
great.
to operate as basically originally designed. Fantastic. The next big step is this design level boring, coring, and soil exploration project that's planned for the spring. It's going to be a multi-week project where the Corps will have a consultant and a drilling contractor visit the site and perform basically boring and testing of the concrete, the concrete bedrock interface, the soil of the embankment near our crane pads, to allow for basically get the data needed for final design. That coring will also help us to better understand the condition of the concrete of the piers that support the existing gates. That will help to inform the degree of demolition that's ultimately going to be necessary. There's sort of two foods of thought on that one, where one is we keep as much of the existing concrete there as we can and work with that. And but the concrete has some challenges, and the other is simply demolish the entirety of the pier and build it back, which has a lot of advantages in terms of being able to better kind of predict what's going to happen with the project, but potentially, it's kind of it's as opposed to trying to work with what's there. So that's going to hopefully give us that data to be able to make a good decision, a cost-effective decision on degree of demolition necessary. So that project is weather pending this spring. Corps has to unfortunately be in the spillway to do this work, and that's always challenging because whenever you're working in the water course, so it's spring is a difficult time to schedule that work, but hopefully we'll be able to push through and get that data this coming spring.
So that's the goal. You're going to need to go out to bid for contractors to do the work.
The Army Corps is handling that. Yes, our Army Corps is actually already out to bid to procure the contractor.
So they're out to bid right now.
It's a procurement contract, yeah, for the engineer boring coring team that's going to do that.
Oh, I was jumping to the construction.
Oh, the construction phase. Okay,
That's going to take some time.
that's absolutely going to have to go out to bid. Yep,
And is it the Army, the Corps that goes out to bid for that?
Army Corps is going to technically run the bidding process. Yep, and they're going to use we're going to be using their procurement process for the construction contractor.
So would they just go out to bid in the state of Vermont, or are they going to go out further than the state?
They're going to go out further than the state of Vermont. It's a pretty sizable project, and while there certainly are probably a few contractors in the state capable, there's also a lot of expertise outside the state on projects of this magnitude.
And this is going to take major work that our contractors in Vermont may not be able to handle.
We can copy plat it.
Hmm?
We can copy plat it. That's what he's thinking.
So
Not doing it.
Well, he built the first one.
yes, so talked a lot about what's going on at the spillway. The dam itself is a very large structure, and there's a lot of infrastructure associated with the dam. In support of the spillway project, as I mentioned, we're going to need to do a 30 to 50 foot drawdown during the project. And in order to do that, we're going to need to be conveying 100% of water, 100% of those 2 years through our tunnel system in penstocks, which basically sit at the foundation level of the dam, 100 feet under the normal water level. The tunnel is 14 foot wide and 11 foot tall, arch-shaped tunnel, concrete tunnel that extends from basically up in the reservoir to the intake through the dam and discharges through the buildings, the downstream end of the dam. And then that's where GMP is tied into. So we thought it very wise to do an assessment of the tunnel and penstock prior to relying on them solely during this project. They have not been evaluated in detail in many years. So we've been working through and are still working on this tunnel and penstock evaluation project. Essentially, the objective is basically to inspect and evaluate and perform destructive and non-destructive testing of the steel penstocks and concrete tunnel to evaluate their condition and remaining service life. The scope is listed here. All of it is really just in support of that data collection and analysis that's being done as to the condition of these of the tunnel and penstock. The project's underway and should be, as I mentioned, is mostly more towards the complete side. It will be completely completed in spring 26. The cleaning work and inspection work was recently completed. We're still doing some work there's several gates and valves associated with the tunnel and penstock. We're still working on some of the actuators there. We're still doing some cleanup from the cleaning work. We are awaiting the final report from the consultant that did the assessment and engineering. Indications are that for the steel penstocks, which you can see in this image here, for the steel penstocks, if we want to essentially avoid probably very costly replacement, we probably will be looking at a coating and lining project sometime in the next 10-year time frame. So essentially, our penstocks are in fair condition. They are reaching close to the end of their service life in the beginning, being over 80 years old, and they are in need of some repair.
So why wouldn't you just do that now while
Right.
there's no water going through them for 2 years?
Money.
Water is going to go through them for 2 years. Water's going to solely go through them for 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
see,
why
and
they're
not
doing
the
it.
spillway.
Right,
Yeah,
so,
they got
well,
it.
Roger
Sure.
that.
so we wanted to evaluate these and make sure there's no fatal flaw in the concept that we're going to simply be relying on these 100%. I think we all feel pretty confident they're going to be reliable for the project. But in making that assessment, we also sort of learned that they are in need of some work, and that's something we need to program in post spillway project, most likely. And there's a final report still coming, so I don't have all the information, but that's sort of what we know, and that's sort of what the cliff notes are telling us at this point.
One little, I know this is like nitpicky, but why is the ladder hand built in the picture?
Well, the ladder's hand built because it has to go through a 20-inch manhole to get into that space. This is inside the tunnel's confined space entry.
Okay,
So typical commercial ladders don't fit through. such a small
I just wondering.
opening,
If it
so
was
we
an OSHA thing or, but it was just,
we custom built it to.
yeah, gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yes, this image here is that we call the transition plate between, so halfway between the crest of the dam and the downstream toe. There's 3 steel penstocks that are sleeved inside the tunnel. 2 of the penstocks, these 2 are 54-inch diameter. They send water to GMP's plant. This 48-inch penstock above sends water around to what we call our low-level outlet. And that's how we would draw down the reservoir if we had to, and there was an emergency or we need additional capacity. This is essentially a picture of that transition plate, and the ladder was just to gain access to for inspection and access to the upper one. This image is of our head gate. This is in the crest of the dam. There's a gatehouse that houses this gate. This gate's lowered 130 feet down into this position to basically shut the tunnel off. So upstream of this is over 100 feet of water just upstream of that gate. That's it. It's closed, sealed position.
I mean, 130 feet, that's like, that's like a 13-story building downwards. Wow, that's cool.
Let us know when you'd like to go see it.
Yeah, I actually would love to see it, actually.
Thank you. I don't want.
I think that the only way we can evaluate was comparison, so we also need to go to Hoover Dam.
St. James.
This is an image of the inside of the penstocks. This is a gentleman's doing a scan of them, but kind of gives you some sense for the condition.
Old rivets.
Their age, they're riveted and welded. One just kind of interesting finding, this is interesting to me as an engineer, was most of that era, most penstocks were sheet steel that were was spun into a circle and welded at the top. And that's what we all expected. And that's what our engineer, who's an expert in this field, expected. And these were not built that way. There's actually two sets of sheet steel that were turned into a semicircle and then welded on at the string line on either side, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but unusual. And so that's requiring a little bit extra evaluation. So
And that's what you're talking about coding?
yes, would be, so there's coating and lining. So coating would be coating the inside. So we would need to basically do a much more thorough cleaning of the inside of the penstocks and coat them with a durable, probably spray applied epoxy style material. And then that would be lining. And then the exterior of the penstocks are also showing some signs of degradation. Those would be coated with a similar material. So
What's the lifespan of those coatings?
typically over 50 years, but it depends on the product and a lot of variables. One challenge is installation criteria and conditions. It's not the greatest conditions in the world in these areas, and certainly time of year and things like that. Doing this work, it turned out to be in early winter, December and early January, was not ideal. And certainly that work couldn't be done under those temperature conditions. It would need to be done in a better time of the year, which is not ideal for environmental or recreation purposes, but that's just some of the challenges.
Just because we're paused, I don't know if you covered this, I was late getting in, but what is destructive/non-destructive testing?
So destructive testing is when we take like a sample out of the dam and essentially we break it to learn about the engineering properties. Non-destructive is we can do it without actually have to do that. An example of a destructive testing is in the concrete tunnel, we poured out concrete samples and then backfilled them with structural concrete and then took those concrete samples to a lab and broke them to understand their strength. The non-destructive testing were scans and things where we could get engineering properties without having to actually impact the material.
That's very clear. Thanks.
And then this next slide is just to talk about a little challenge that we had this fall at the spillway during routine annual inspections that we have of our hoist systems. in September. Gate 3, which is the large 35-foot gate, was red tagged. The brake system that runs on the hoist equipment was found not to be reliably stopping the gate per the specifications. Due to that, we placed the gate in a fully closed position. We activated the dam's emergency action plan on the non-emergency advisory level, just to let everyone know downstream. We had one gate essentially out of service. It could have been operated in a true emergency, but the reliability of it was a little bit uncertain. We worked with our consultant to design a replacement. Unfortunately, it had to be like a special ordered item given the low conditions that those gates have. Installation was completed in January 2026. Project cost wasn't terribly high. I mean, design, equipment purchase, and logistics of installation was roughly 20,000, but it was a bit of a project. EAP was deactivated following that, and all 3 gates are fully operable now. But it serves as a good reminder that this lifting equipment we have is most of it's over 80 years old. It's near the end of its service life in the beginning. Where we have this project kind of on the precipice of replacing all of this equipment, so we're hesitant to go and replace everything. But if you had 20 or 30 more years before we were going to do that, that's a project we'd probably be looking to do. And this is a good example that this equipment is again kind of starting to age out and nearing the end of its reliable service life.
So where did the 20,000 come from? Pay for it?
20,000 came from, I believe that came from.
The other.
So let's see. The design was done by GEI Consultants. That was general funded. The equipment purchase was purchased through Northeast Handling. That's a general services contract. So that was done by general fund.
So when you say general fund, just for terminology, what world is that? Is that your operating budget? Or is that some of the money we've already put aside for this project?
That was in your 3.115 from 3 years ago. That was cash fund general fund.
Okay, so it's-
To capital bond. Did I get that right, Ben?
It's not capital money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but it was in that 3115 appropriation a number of years.
Well, we had a cash appropriation of 4.5.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Sure.
So is the 3.1 that you're referring to part of that 4.5 or is the 3.1?
No,
Was that part of the ARPA money?
that.
It was part of ARPA.
There was your ARPA. I'll talk money in a couple minutes, but
Okay, it was part of ARPA.
you have given them, dollars to work on this dam, and we've also given them dollars to do this Waterbury Dam spillway project. These motor replacements did not come from Waterbury Dam spillway projects. These came from capital appropriations or general fund that you have.
This came from we piecemealed that $20,000 project together. The contractor or the engineer that was under a contract that was being funded by general fund. The contractor that does the annual inspections for us is it's not capital eligible expense because like a maintenance contractor that's paid by general funds. And then logistics, we have a earthwork contractor that does snow plowing and earthwork and other small projects for us. And we needed their assistance with the logistics of getting this equipment installed because of the challenges of just getting in and out of there. So that's also general funded because that's maintenance work and not capital.
Operating.
But again, it just serves as a reminder, this equipment is close to the end in the beginning. This next slide, just kind of go over an in-depth analysis that one of my colleagues did in our program of the maintenance and capital costs of Waterbury Dam from 1982 to 2025. Pretty fortunate that our predecessors kept good quality records, although maybe a little bit difficult to interpret at times, of the money spent and maintenance that was done at the dam in that time frame. So as part of that analysis, we're also fully aware of those major capital projects that were done in the mid-2000s. That was the seepage control project. That was roughly 26 million. That was kind of set aside as a special project, as is the planned spillway project. It's also kind of set aside as a special project. But as we strive to come up to date with upcoming dam safety rules, be good stewards of this largest flood facility that we have in the state and that we own, and just become better dam owners and better do a better job maintaining this facility long term. As we look at those costs from 1982 to 2025, they're put into current year dollars. Roughly the average spent over that time frame was roughly $200,000 a year in current dollars. The low we spent was $0. The high was $1.6 million. And as we look ahead, we are kind of find ourselves in a situation where we're playing catch up I guess the tunnel in Penstock would be a good example of that. Not a lot had been done with that infrastructure in many years. And now we're finding that, while not necessarily imminent issue condition, it's not too far off of our horizon where we need to spend some money to keep that going. We've learned a lot about our gates and actuators and valves that weren't necessarily passed down to us, with a lot of awareness that what we should be doing, and we're learning that we need to be doing more than we are to make sure they maintain reliability. So we find ourselves playing a bit of catch up, and we've kind of estimated over the next 10 years in terms of just the sort of major maintenance work, that we're going to have an annual need of roughly $500,000 a year, which is annualized. So in theory, there's going to be some years that are lower than that, some years that are higher than that. But essentially, we need to continue to invest in this infrastructure, to really bring it up to speed to where it needs to be, and make sure that everything's as good a condition it can be and reliable as it can be.
That's in the ideal world.
That's in the ideal world.
$500,000 a year, depending where it comes from, which bucket. Some could be capital, because you might have infrastructure, and others would be just general.
Yep. And this is just for Waterbury. We're extending that analysis to Eastbury and Wrightsville, and then eventually we're going to hopefully be extending that analysis to all our own dams. Unfortunately, I think it's fair to say that we've underfunded these assets for an extended period of time, and we sort of find ourselves a little behind the 8 ball.
And Ben, is this rhetorical maybe? Do you feel like you're able to kind of get on this stuff more now because you have more people work like yourself? And you're saying there's 3 or 4 people that used to not be those people.
Correct.
So you're feeling that you guys are doing the job of looking at what we have, doing analysis on it. So that's why we are finding that we need to do this.
We had the appropriations in past years that allow us to look at things and things that our predecessors never had access, money that predecessors never really had access to. So allowing us to kind of start to really understand better what needs to be done here. So yes, between this, our staffing are able to put more staff focusing on this facility, as well as the money that's been allocated in the past to allow us to really evaluate these things and better understand kind of where things are. Unfortunately, it's kind of been maintenance has been underdone historically on these facilities. That's certainly fair to say across the board, and Waterbury is no exception.
Thank you.
So we got about 5 minutes more. We can push through this. This is the important piece.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
I love working with Ben. I mean, it's so impressive, but then the magnitude of the infrastructure up there is impressive. And anytime the committee wants to come have a look, Ben does an amazing tour of it, and it is incredibly, it's
A good tour in the spring.
yeah, the magnitude of it when you finally see it. Like looking down 13th-story building down to the bottom of the pit, you literally can do that. You go into a little building, a little rail, you look down, and you are looking all the cabling. It's very impressive. So I just let you know that I would talk through what we have for federal funding in hand and where we're at in terms of appropriations. So this slide right here does that. The cost estimates are refining on the project. So about a year and a half ago, I was sweating because the number was 92 million based on their whatever tier 2 or tier 3 cost estimate. We're up to tier 5 or 6 or something like that. So now that they've got a better bead on what exactly we're going to do, the costs are coming down. So we're in at $76.2 million is the cost estimate right now. I want to talk a little bit about the cost share. There was a big success in that. The cost share for this project started at 65-35 for the very initial feasibility design that we used some state money to support. It was not capital money. This was back in 2016 when the project started. Used some Lake Champlain Basin program money that Senator Leahy had directed to make the initial assessment happen. And then as we came into the project, the way the project would have structured would be 50-50 cost share for the dam safety modification study that Ben mentioned, and then 35-65 for design and construction, full implementation. We successfully advocated with the congressional delegation that in prior years when this was built, the cost share for the state was much more advantageous, and that Congress should really honor that more advantageous cost rate. And so the cost rate we have now is 7.1%.
That's the amount that we paid when when the dam was built,
Correct.
7.1%. And that's what we argued, that we should be at that same percentage.
Who made that argument?
We did, the state
job.
made that. The
Yeah.
state made that.
Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago, because we
Yeah.
were at the point of almost 50-50 for this.
So that was, we can thank Senator Sanders and his team for getting that for the Water Resources Development Act, WRDA. We're going to talk about WRDA a couple of times here. So, federally appropriated and federally authorized. So those are two different things, right? Federally appropriated, we have $40 million of federal funds in the bank. We have an authorization ceiling of $60 million. And about every 6 months, I talk to Mr. Ethan Hinch from Senator Sanders' office about getting into the budget committee and plussing that number up. A little bit more about that in a moment. WRDA, Water Resources Development Act, is being negotiated now. The likelihood is it won't pass out until the very end of this year. It's an election cycle. It's an election year. WRDA is must-pass legislation, so it will. A lot of states rely on it for a lot of things. Army Corps, major Army Corps projects, drinking water projects. But it may take a little while. So I frankly am not displeased that this project slipped by a year. As long as we're all comfortable holding those state match dollars that I'll talk about in a moment, stable to fund the project, it gives us an extra year to work with a different Congress, maybe an extra 2 years to work with a different Congress.
It's more functional.
Perhaps, so I think that's really kind of an important thing. And our senators, obviously Senator Sanders, very senior, Senator Welch is gaining in seniority and influence as well. So, and Congresswoman Balint. So there's hopefully growing leverage in the budget space.
So is that 80,000 on top of the combined 100,000?
So let me explain that. There are $40 million sitting in the bank, federal dollars sitting with the Army Corps, already fully appropriated to this project, appropriated. The authorization ceiling right now is $60 million. So if Congress were to be willing to authorize appropriate additional money, they've got $20 more million of headroom. The congressional delegation for WRDA 2026 is going in for a lift of the authorization to 80 million and to include language that the authorization ceiling lift, all they need to do is to receive the Army Corps' acknowledgement that that's the amount of money necessary to do the project. That's important because that means that they don't argue whether or not to raise the authorization ceiling. It's simply the Army Corps says this is how much money we need. We have that language now for up to 60, which is helpful. So that's what Senator Sanders' team is trying to get done with Senator Welch. And then, of course, you have to lift appropriations too. So in order to reduce our maximum exposure, and there's two mechanisms for that. Appropriations is one, and the other is exercising leverage over the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' annual work plan. So the Corps itself has a lot of money, a lot of federal money that they can direct into their portfolio of activities. And they can be directed by congressional action to take some of their money and put it into this account. And that happened a few years ago.
But the ceiling is still there.
Well, nominally, we'll get that ceiling up to 80.
Right.
Yeah. So then you've got two mechanisms. You've got Army work plan, Army Corps work plan, or you've got appropriations to get the money into the account.
At whatever, at 60 or 80 though.
Correct.
It's not like we can say, let's make it 120.
Yeah.
The limit is still going to be.
Well, what they're doing, I mean, they were going to go for 95.
Okay.
And then the cost numbers came down. So they're tracking along the cost numbers, which is good, right? So we're
80 seems right if it's at
Being-
76.
being honest with respect to what the Corps is learning. So essentially, if we get all dollars if we get full appropriations against an $80 million authorization, our maximum exposure for match is only $1 more million.
And what you currently have.
Than what we currently have. However, that's all contingent on the appropriations themselves lifting. If we don't get the authorization ceiling lift beyond 60, then our exposure is 13. And if nothing else happened, and we needed to fund this project. This is a scary number, but I just want to offer that maybe it's not that scary compared to the magnitude of the infrastructure. With what we have in the bank and our matching funds, our maximum exposure, if we were to bid and go today, would be 32. That's a lot of money, but we're over halfway there and our delegation is working hard with us. So
What if the dam fails? It's 300 to 800 million.
So
this is cheap insurance.
I'm just acknowledging that that's a lot of money and I just want to put on the table, as I said, Chair, I mean, the full set of where we are, where we could be. And that's why in that slide, I really tried to spell that out clearly so that you have that. We're not asking for anything this year. And then finally, this last slide just shows sort of the breakdown of design and implementation costs and how it all sugars off into the 170,000. And I won't take you through these numbers exactly because these are coming out of the cost share tables from the dam safety modification study report. So obviously there'll be some adjustments in there. I do want to note that we've already spent $3 million in total, 1.5 of which came from capital appropriations. So that's the first two lines of the bottom table. And that paid for the dam safety modification study. So we've got 193,000 left to spend on the second 750K iteration that you gave us in capital bonded dollars. And that was back in 2021 and 2022, those two depth IDs. And then lastly, in 2024, in the cash fund, given all those excess receipts we're seeing, you appropriated $4.5 million. We are holding on to that for the bidding and construction. So that really breaks down the money for you.
Deputy,
Best I can.
I didn't quite follow you where you said the 3 million. I don't know where, I see the starting.
You know what? My fault. I wanted to add a different line to this table, but I kind of ran out of time last night.
Okay.
So if you look at the bottom table and you see original appropriation,
Yes.
you see 743, 240, and then 750.
Yes.
That totals just about $1.5 million.
Okay.
Those were our matching funds for $1.5 million of federal money that didn't show up on this top table. What I should have done would have been to add a row on the top table that said dam safety modification study, $3 million federal, 1.5 state, 1.5.
That's, I just needed that clarity. Thank you.
You bet. And that's the rundown.
So what the governor has put in is 150,000 in cash.
Right.
What is that 150,000 for?
So Ben, if you don't mind, I'll answer and then you can fill in the gaps just for time here. So Ben just walked you through the penstock project and you saw the people inside of the penstocks cleaning, testing. We had a super low water year, and because we had a super low water year, we actually couldn't get the water out of the dam quick enough to get in there. Right? Did I get that right?
Right.
So the team, Ben's contractual team, was delayed by a number of months, literally months, while waiting for conditions to be adequate to get those tunnels dewatered. And so that basically added some cost to the project. Ben is belt and suspenders asking you for $150,000 just to make sure that we get that funded and that we don't have to dip into the 4.5 in order to do it. I explained that last time. Did I get that right, Ben?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
Cool.
Any questions on this, folks? Because we are running a little late. I want to bring in Michelle to talk about a definition for corrections and then offer time for the little group to get together for a while dealing with the budget. Anything else?
Great presentation.
This is
Yeah,
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
that'd be a good field trip too in the spring.
It would be a good field trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really want to see it. It's,
Yeah.
I'm impressed every time I go. Sir, you mentioned Hoover Dam and, it's not quite that, but, it was for me to go see Hoover Dam after having learned about Waterbury from Ben, really contextualized it. So,
Or you can go in the reverse and go with the one in Highgate. bring it down.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really.
We'll leave the Zoom and you all have an excellent day. We'll be back anytime you need us.
Okay, well, you will be, because we're gonna be doing some, the DEC on clean water, drinking water, municipal pollution grants.
That's right. Patrick and Emily will be here with you this afternoon.
That's,
So get a lot of DEC today.
okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Yes, you bet.
Thank you. So I'm gonna hand out to folks that, I'm gonna hand paper copies of our agenda because I'm thinking a lot of folks aren't aware of our agenda, not looking at our webpage. So this,
That's
it's changes every day. So I'm thinking it would be good practice for folks to.
Come on.
I've also read that in another.
So our agenda is always posted on our webpage, but I have a feeling it's not being looked at. So, and it does change every day. Brian?
Yeah, Kate, I've got an agenda question, which is, do you save them anywhere? Because if I ever want to go back and figure out what day something happened, like, do you have?
State under where the agenda is.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna shift gears, folks, really quick. Folks, we're gonna shift gears really quick. Michelle Childs is here, legal counsel, to give us a quick review of the current definition in statute of recidivism. I'm bringing this up for a variety of reasons. One is, there's been committee questions about recidivism, and there's a layman's understanding of what it is. We do have a definition in statute as to what it is, and it's a number of years old. There is also a proposal in House Judiciary Committee to change the definition, and that will also impact how DOC classifies folks. So we're going to get involved in this to a certain level once House Judiciary figures out what the new definition is, and then it will have an impact on DOC, which we'll need to. So we need to know right now what the law says in terms of the definition of recidivism. So that's why I've asked Michelle to come in. She and I both have some history on this a little bit, but it's better to hear it from the legal counsel than from me.
Good morning. Thanks for having me in. So there's a few of you who I haven't worked with much, but as the chair said, I'm part of the judiciary team, and I actually used to do a lot more of corrections issues when we were just a team of two, but that's been well over a decade. So just want to let you know, I'm not up on the latest, but the chair asked me in because the definition that you're considering actually was adopted in 2013. And so I had drafted that at the time. And my memory is not a fraction of what Representative Emmons' memory is, which is unbelievable. But I do recall a little bit about kind of the history with that. And if it's okay, I'll share my screen and I'll show you.
Well, looks like we have two documents from you. Are we starting with the BSA?
You do have documents for me?
I think so.
Huh.
Maybe not. Am I in the wrong place?
No, sure, but that's actually not what we're working off of.
Well, never mind.
I only have one, so.
I hope the paper copy that was distributed is the correct. Because I wanted the current definition of
Right.
recidivism.
Right, and I can pull that up. I can show you that. I'm having, sorry, my,
Is that in Title 28, Chapter 001?
yeah, it's section 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've got.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah, we've got the paper copy of it, Michelle.
And it is
Right.
up on our website too.
What I did want to show you though, I was going to show you the original act, but that's okay. Maybe not. So as I had mentioned, it was adopted in an act in 2013. The General Assembly had been talking about, as part of Justice Reinvestment One, right, looking at and saying, how do we assess our programs and our pilot projects and all of those things to see whether or not they are actually, working? Is there any benefit to it? What kind, should we have a standard measure of recidivism? My recollection at the time is that the General Assembly was working a lot with Council of State Governments on Justice Reinvestment One. And my recollection is how this new definition in 2013 came to be was that it was a measure that was being used by some other states and was shared with the General Assembly here, and Senator Sears, who was longtime chair of Senate Judiciary, introduced a bill. And there were two pieces to that bill. One was this definition in 28 VSA Section 4, and the other one was what was at the time kind of the annual extension of the prohibition on using correctional facilities to house, and I don't know if this is the term anymore.
Caps.
What is the term now?
In caps.
In caps. Right. Public inebriates was the name that was constantly used at the time, but I was guessing that's probably evolved since then.
It's in caps.
Yeah, so every year there would be like a push out of that date. And so there were only two things in that bill. I went back and I looked at the legislative history. We don't have the files here, they're in archives. But I went back and looked at the legislative history, and there was a total of one hearing for less than an hour in the Senate on the bill. It was me and Andy Toledo, who was our wonderful DOC commissioner for many years. And then there was one hearing in this committee, and it was me and Lisa Menard, who was the deputy commissioner at the time. So there was not, there's not a real lot to go on based on the record in terms of where this came from. I went back and I looked at old legislative reports. I found actually one from 2011, so predating that language on recidivism, where the General Assembly had asked the Crime Research Group, used to be called the Vermont Center for Justice Research, back when Max Schluter was running it, and had commissioned them to do a study doing kind of a literature review of and looking at all the other states and what types of programs are out there, what kind of results are they seeing? This was kind of a new thing at the time. Now you guys are so focused on data-driven, programs. But again, at that time, it was still kind of emerging, that thing to say, we need some standard measures to say, all these programs that we're doing, are they effective? Do they have the impacts that we're wanting to have? And so there was actually this report that was in 2011 from Crime Research Group on evidence-based initiatives to reduce recidivism. And the one thing that I'll just note about that is, again, there wasn't any standard measure at the time. And then when they looked at the Vermont programs that were operating at the time, they found that some had a standard kind of measure, some did not, but they all used different standards kind of to determine whether or not there was recidivism. And so looking at the different programs, some would consider recidivism if the subject had a criminal contact with the police. Some would be the subject was rearrested for a crime after they completed the program. Others that they were charged with the crime. So there was, a charge and then maybe probable cause at arraignment. So it got to that stage. Others would use if the person was convicted. And so, so again, I'm speculating, but I'm thinking at the time it was kind of like, well, maybe use a standard measure and everybody's using the same measure. And so that's what you have in your current law for Section 4, which I'm sorry that my screen is that my sharing's not working. But so under the current definition, it's at the department. So when we're using the word department in this title, it's going to be being DOC. Shall calculate the rate of recidivism based upon offenders who are sentenced to more than 1 year of incarceration, who, after release from incarceration, return to prison within 3 years for a conviction for a new offense or a violation of supervision And then the new incarceration sentence or time served on the violation is at least 90 days. So pretty complicated. So I'm sure that somebody gave me that exact language because I don't think I could have come up with it myself. And so that's been there. What I've generally heard is people kind of forget that it's there. I don't think it's necessarily being used. My understanding from the wonderful folks at Crime Research Group is that it really kind of, you may use a different standard depending on what type of program you're looking at, the type of folks. Are you talking about, certain populations, and that it can change. So it's not necessarily that you need to have a very specific formula like this in statute. But I think what you should do is you should hear, from DOC, have they been using this? Because this is specifically directed to DOCs to make calculations based on this formula. Are they still doing that? I don't know. Do they find any value still in this? There is, as the chair mentioned, a bill 8410 in House Judiciary. And the plan there is to kind of do a strike all to that. They're looking at doing a new definition of recidivism to be, kind of a little more streamlined, clearer. I'm kind of working with the chair on that, but generally kind of this idea that recidivism means the tendency to relapse into a habit of criminal activity as evidenced by a person who is convicted of a criminal offense after they've gotten a conviction for a previous one. So it's like a much simpler kind of idea of how we would use the word a recidivist, like colloquially. And then the idea is to then create this new subchapter, and we may put it in Title 20, might put it in Title 13 with crimes, to start putting in statute some provisions around collection of criminogenic data, right? And so to kind of focus on that, but to not necessarily say for purposes of all programming and things like this, it has to be measured each time according to something very specific. But you have a more general definition, and then there may be some more specific goals with what the information you're trying to get. And so that's kind of their idea. And so my understanding from Senator Lalonde was that, Representative Lalonde, is that, they wanted this committee to look at the Title 28 definition and say, should we keep it? Should we amend it? If you do keep it, I think their suggestion would be to call it something else, figure out how is DOC using it? Why is it valuable? And to be a little more specific about maybe in that statute, how it's to be used. But I think, you want to hear from the Crime Research Group and DOC about, honestly, I think whether you even still need it doesn't have value for you anymore.
No, wait a minute. I didn't understand. Whether we need a definition of a recidivism?
Of this existing definition that's
Oh,
Title 28, this particular one, right? Because I think, what the work that's going to be going on in House Judiciary is they're going to be doing it, tracking it to certain types of data collection throughout the criminal justice system. And the question is, do you need this? Right?
Based on what is happening in the judiciary right now, whether that's proposed bills or this bill, is this purely to square up our data collection, or is there also talk about enhanced penalties for recidivism once we redefine it?
I have not been part of any discussions around enhanced. So there's certain legislation that's been introduced, that kind of a thing. But my understanding is just purely about data collection and definitions, but not about creating any kind of structure for enhanced penalties based on recidivism.
That is a slippery slope on which we're about to step.
Yes. So Brian and then Kevin.
Yeah, well, it may go to yours too. Actually, it's a two-parter. One is back to Rep. Winter's question, which is, We need some definition of recidivism. Is there a world in which we get rid of this and something doesn't happen in judiciary and we're left with, okay? And the other one is.
Mike, if I could follow up.
Yeah,
on that.
please.
I don't know, but my guess would be that because they have possession of the bill, the recidivism bill, they'll be working on that. You would give them a recommendation about what to do about this particular definition, and they would include that into their committee amendment to H410.
And then the other is actually a follow-up on Rep. Hedrick. And so I think you had said that you weren't quite sure, why was it 1 year? Why was it 90 days? Whatever. If we were to change the definition to what I think you suggested, automatically we're going to see an increase, aren't we, in recidivism? Because don't these stipulations are
Right.
basically holding
So
back
we're not,
compared to- Yeah.
I think judiciary is not proposing to like the kind of definition that I talked about changing it here. They want to use a definition of recidivism that's more general. We'll certainly, as part of that we'll look at where recidivism is used in statute, right? Whether it does indicate anything in terms of penalties or substantive rights or things like that. But I think right now is that they're saying that it's rather than kind of this exists, but it doesn't appear to be being used, and let's pull all the data stuff together. But it's really for the purpose of data collection.
But to use the imperfect analogy, it's sort of like what's going on with autism perhaps, and we're going to see an increase in
The numbers.
our recidivism rate, regardless of what it means if we do what's being.
Because it's a much broader
We're gonna capture
definition,
more, yeah.
right? And I think that that's going to certainly be part of the conversation there. But again, I don't think, I'd have to look, but we don't generally, penalties currently are not based on recidivism, right? So we have things specifically in criminal law where it will be first offense is this penalty, second and subsequent offense is this penalty, things like that. But we don't have, I'll do a statute search, but it's not like where our criminal titles in terms of like expand, are not affected by this definition.
Good time would be,
Pardon?
good time would be. Earn time, We just had the conversation yesterday that proposes
On the alternative.
looking at prior felonies, which is going to be defined by recidivism. And if we broaden that to the extent that this proposal is suggesting,
So for that on the good time bill, and I think is Eric does good time is.
Yeah.
Did you have Eric come in on this? I would look at it and look at the language, but you can make adjustments in that so you're not triggering certain language. So you say for purposes of good time, this is what qualifies, this is what doesn't.
I'm going to show my ignorance, but I would think that a 3-strike rule would be an example of where this definition becomes critical. Because if you haven't defined what first strike is, second strike, third strike, by the time you get to the third strike, the incarceration is longer, the penalty is greater. I think we need a very clear definition. That's obvious. Is there a federal definition? Or is this strictly state definition?
We don't have a 3-strike rule anyway.
No, I understand, but that would be an example where if this changes and you had a 3-strike rule, that would make a major difference in the.
Well,
Is there a federal definition? It's the only thing that I.
of recidivism?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think that, we can take a look at where is it used currently in statute. So let's say for purposes of Title 28, right? See where it comes up.
And Title 28 is corrections. That's what it's.
But it's not going to, I hear your concerns. And I think I understand about that because you guys are dealing with a lot of corrections data and things like that. But right now, as far as I know, there's nothing that we work on, certainly in Title 13 in the crimes and criminal procedure that is linked to recidivism. It's all very specific because when you're drafting a criminal statute, you have to be very clear about the prohibited conduct and the penalties. You have to give fair warning, all of those things. So they're not, so something isn't like, you know, if someone is a recidivist, right? We don't use those terms. It's that if someone, you know, someone can be charged with aggravated domestic if they have a prior conviction for a domestic, you know, like things like that, where it's very specific in how we craft those. We do have actually habitual offender statutes, but again, it doesn't use the terms like in terms of if someone is recidivist. It's like if someone has a conviction for 3 violent felonies, then you can charge under this other statute that will add for an enhanced penalty. But it's very specific to type of offense. Is it a misdemeanor? Is it a felony? Is it violent? Is it nonviolent? Is it first, second, third? Those types of things. So this is just about focusing on the data collection and what do you consider to be recidivism. And again, it's used primarily in the context of assessment of programming and the types of things that you do in here all the time. And to be able to say, okay, what were the outcomes there, right? Were people get out of the program and able to get housing and a job and not wind up back in the criminal justice system? Or did we not see necessarily any particularly positive results from this, you know? So
the reason why there's some timeframes in there, because you are looking at the rate.
mhm.
So the reason there's that 3-year time frame is one, to, from my recollection, give time for the person to adjust, being out in the community, participate in programming, that type of thing. That's why the 3 years is there. So there's a time frame. The 90-day is because at that time, and it's still true, there's a lot of churn that comes in our correctional facility. There could be a violation of some conditions. They may be charged with petty larceny or whatever. They may be in the facility for a few days and then they're out. Or they could be there for a month and then they're out, but they're not creating a new crime. So that's why there's some structure to that definition. It is also, the people are very clear. A lot of folks will say, well, you've got this program out there. How successful is it? What's the recidivism rate? You needed some measure to determine what that recidivism rate is. You've got to have a definition of recidivism if you're going to figure out what the rate is. So this is why we've put together that.
But if I may, is what I was hearing from the folks at CRG is that they don't necessarily use one measure, right? Because it may depend on
One measure of programs.
for recidivism, right?
Recidivism.
And so I think that is why there's kind of this idea of going to a more general definition of how you use the term recidivism in the statutes, you know, which is to mean just generally reoffending, right? And then you can pick how you measure that from data, you know, however they decide to do it, date of conviction from, and then until a person is arraigned, you know, so probable cause is found, or whether it's the date of conviction to date of conviction or sentencing, you know, you can make those choices. But I think the idea is to have a more general definition. And then when you're focused on gathering certain crime data, you may specify that for purposes of calculation of this or that. And then I think, you know, when did you have crime research group in yet?
Yesterday, just to talk about general data.
Mhm.
And the question that some members of the committee really posed, isn't it more cost effective to incarcerate folks than to have folks out in the community creating damage? And isn't it more cost effective to incarcerate folks than to have them out in the community? So we really got a history a little bit about the crime research group and what their what their purpose is, maybe how they operate, and also they gave us some.
Yeah, they're tremendously helpful, you know, and Robin's been there forever, and then Monica used to be at the Department of Corrections, right? So they really know their stuff. And I would suggest that you have them come in and talk to you just about this recidivism issue. When I went back and looked in the file, because Ben had originally written H410 and had taught, and they were giving comments and back and forth. So they're very knowledgeable about this and can talk to you more about what they think would be valuable. Maybe, you know, speak to the Title 28 definition. Does that still have value? If so, you know, what do you call it? And for what purposes would it be used?
You have another question, James, that you have?
No, actually, you covered most of mine. And then I was just gonna say, regardless of what definition you use, because Alice was dead on about what she said about the timeframes and stuff. And then there's the colloquial use. And is there value of having your definition line up with what society thinks it is for different data, well, for data collection and for other reasons, but no matter what the definition is, how we choose to use the results of that is our purview to, you know, it doesn't have to be used in a certain way, i.e. to limit earn time or anything else. But you covered everything pretty much as I say, so.
So this has been very helpful, Michelle.
I'm so
I
glad.
really appreciate it.
The chair asked me and I was like, I don't know that I've got anything to remember from back then.
More.
Fascinating.
But I think it's really important for the committee to have some grounding in terms of what the definition and statute is, and that the purpose was there to measure how successful programs work. It's not for general public thinks, oh, they created a crime, they've been released, now they've created another crime, that's which it is not necessary. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. So it'll give us an opportunity to really vet the issue, really see how effective it is in determining whether a program is successful or not, and also finding out how DOC uses it. Because the term is thrown around there pretty loosely,
Very loose.
and there isn't any understanding behind it. That's what I'm seeing. So I just wanted to put that out on the table for folks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Michelle.
Thank you.
Michelle.
You can come in here anytime.
Hey, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Not at 4:35.
It took longer. We're just running behind a lot today.
Thank you.
Thank you very
So
much.
I want to offer time for you five for the budget to do some work. I was hoping to give you 45 minutes. And do you think you want to stay here and get rid of some of us?
I think that's better.
Always.
Huh?
I won't be offended.
I won't be
You can
offended.
ask me to leave. Yeah.
So they can stay. We're not going to be on YouTube because we do not have a quorum. There is just a small group of folks who are going to be working on budget issues. To prepare us to do work next week with appropriations.
Yeah.
So let's go off of YouTube. We'll be back around, hate to do this, but Gus is coming in around 10:30.
Yes.
Yeah.
Enjoy your